some family stuff come up. He's doing fine, but he had something come up last minute. My name is Bo Blevins. I'm the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for VACo, and I'll sort of pinch hit for Chad and MC the meeting here today. We're honored to have three great panelists here today, speakers, to share, to talk a little bit about some rural issues, to hear them, and then maybe get some comments back from you guys, and go from there. So first up on the agenda today, we have Delegate Keith Hodges for the Virginia House of Delegates, 98th District of Virginia, and I think he's going to come up and say a few words. Thanks for being here, Delegate.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming out today. And first, thank Dean for what they do in Richmond for you. You have a top-notch team up there. They keep us very well informed, and it is a pleasure to work with all of them. I'm in the 98th District, which is the Middle Peninsula, and I serve on health welfare institutions and county, cities, and towns. And always respected, local government officials, but now I even have more respect for you after dealing with the issues there and seeing what you all put up with each and every day. I really don't know how you do it at the local level, but thank you for what you do. Virginia, there are In Virginia, there are 95 counties and 35 independent cities and towns. Of those, we have 67 counties and cities that are classified as rural. We have 20 mixed rural and 16 as mixed urban, and 31 as urban. But you know what? Those numbers were higher just a few years ago. With redistricting, lost ground in the General Assembly, and now you're outnumbered in the General Assembly because of the population shift, those districts have moved north. So it's more important now than ever that you have a strong voice in Richmond. A lot of folks say, all right, we want our voice north of Fredericksburg, let's just make it a separate state. Is that an option? Is it really an option to do that? A lot of people, and I hear it all the time, you probably hear it all the time, but it's not. Local governments in rural Virginia rely more on state government to subsidize their essential services such as education, public safety, more now than ever. In an economic recession, where the state of Virginia is struggling, we're struggling to balance our budget, potential loss or reduction of state revenue implies that rural areas would experience more drastic reductions in services to the residents. So in contrast, urban governments are much better positioned to endure such reductions, as only 30% of their total revenue comes from the state. Revenue from local sources accounted for a little over half of rural localities' total revenue, much lower than the state average of 64.8%, much lower. For every dollar rural government received from the state, residents and businesses in the rural areas sent in 75 cents to the state. In comparison, for every dollar received from the state, mixed rural sent 94 cents, mixed urban areas sent in $1.22, and urban areas $1.59. So how do we solve this? What do we do? Over the tax year, over the year, I'm not going to get into it. There's been discussion about a level playing field between counties and cities, and I'm not going to open that can of worms, but there's always that discussion. And just in the meals tax alone, if a meals tax were implemented, or could be implemented, $255 million in tax revenue to the counties across the state. The overriding problem in Virginia is that the old economic base in Virginia, it's no longer sufficient to support the population of rural Virginia at a level of income reasonably comparable to that of urban Virginia. So what do? We have to do something different. We have to think out of the box, and we must find new economic bases. And the key challenge is finding that economic basis, kind of throwing up, what are we? What are we going to do? Without jobs, without a workforce, without all of this, these things, we're not going to make it in rural Virginia. We're going to continue to lose our voice, and we're going to continue to lose jobs and a skilled workforce to Northern Virginia. So what type of economic base should rural Virginia really establish? Well, really, it's up to you. Historically, many rural areas, they're characterized by, open land and farmland, and they have specialized in agriculture. But that specialization now is, it's more mechanized, so you have a decreased number of workers in farming. And in today's global economy, the increase in globalization, it's not just in your county anymore, it's not just in Virginia, it is a world market. It is a world market. And the globalization of labor that accelerated in the 1990s as the development of new information technologies allowed the United States to exercise control over the far-flung operations and to chase cheaper and lower production costs. So from this perspective, it really appears that large-scale manufacturing, is that an option for Virginia? It very well may. We're seeing some places in Virginia where there is a growth in large-scale manufacturing that we thought was gone. Certain areas in Virginia have found their niche. They found Northern Virginia has found, the corridor, well, the federal employees in the military. Tidewater, Virginia, with the port, 1 in 8 jobs are dependent upon that port of Virginia. And we did think, how is that port going to help me? And what can I do with that port in my locality or in my region to have economic growth? I'm a small businessman, I'm an independent pharmacist. And a lot of folks say independent pharmacy is dead. You're a dinosaur. But the independent pharmacists that are out there, they're thriving and they're doing well. Why? Because they think differently and they niche market themselves. They niche market the goods, their services, and if you go into any independent pharmacy, they're all different. If you go into any one across the country, they're all different. So you need to look at your locality, your region, and not think about what's going on inside of West Virginia or inside. Think about yourselves or that region. How are you different? And what can you do to niche market yourself? So in all of this, government, really needs to continue to play a role. And what should government do as we move forward? Well, number one, and we've talked about this in our rural meetings in the Peninsula and the Northern Neck, is invest in public infrastructure, number one. We have areas of the state that really need interstate highways. So you can have large-scale manufacturing, but if you can't move those goods from point A to point B, it doesn't serve you well at all. We are mid-Atlantic, right positioned in the middle of the coast, and we have the workforce, we have the people that can build these products, but we have to be able to move them from point A to point B. Number two, broadband. It is a huge challenge, and I don't care what type of business you open today, how basic that the manufacturing or whatever it may be, you need broadband to have a business. Now, we can't ask private enterprise, and I hear it all the time, that, hey, why haven't they come out and run, broadband into my area? We can't ask the private sector to do that. I mean, they need to make money. So we have to look at technology, and I have a meeting in a couple of weeks with some folks from the Middle Peninsula area with some new technology that may be available. And also we have to look at possibly public-private partnerships to move forward with infrastructure. Number two, and I hear it all the time, we'll just go aside for a little bit. We had a meeting in the Northern Neck where we invited stakeholders just to tell us what they want and how we can move forward. And broadband was number one. And number two, invest in education and invest in the workforce. The days of just having a high school diploma, they're gone. We need to educate these folks and have skilled workers in our communities. And I think back when, I graduated from high school. I graduated from a small high school, 58 people. And in my class, only a few of us actually came home and went to college and stayed there and stayed in the district. But what about all of the other folks that stayed there that maybe didn't go to college? We're losing them. We need to train them. We need to teach them the skills, vocational programs. We need to really invest in those because those are the folks that are going to stay home. They're the folks that may start a small business. jobs are dependent on that port in Virginia. And we are the only natural port that can handle those large ships when the Panama Canal opens. So it's very, very important that we move forward with something like this. Number 4, provide financial assistance to entrepreneurial activities. If you don't have access to capital and don't have too many hurdles to access capital, they're not going to open a business. Entrepreneur spirit, you're going to kill it if they can't get a loan, if they can't have access to the capital. And number 5, develop local leadership in the rural areas. Leadership development can be a cooperation among neighboring communities, so they can pool their resources to market and promote the region for potential investors. Too often we think inside of our borders or in our own town or in our county, but we need to open it up and look at regions and how we can help one another and promote the entire area. The key challenge really facing rural Virginia is finding your economic strength and upon which you can build. And the solution to this fundamental program varies depending on locality and region to region. And local government is often the forgotten government. It really is. Most rural citizens, your constituents, don't realize the impact you can have on your community, much more than we can really have in Washington or in Richmond. A whole lot more. And, we've been talking about the presidential race and what's been going on in Washington, but you can have more of a difference in your area than I can or anyone can in Washington. So with that, I'll take any questions and would love to talk to you or talk to you a little bit later. So thank you all for what you did. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. And Keith has been a real friend to localities since he came into the House of General Assembly, the General Assembly and the House of Delegates there. It's actually been really helpful with me and Dean as we try to get VACo's legislative platform pushed up there. So he's been a real asset to us. Next we have Becky Cox coming to talk to us a little bit about rapid response and some issues in that line. And Becky, welcome to have you.
As he said, I am Becky Caucus. My title is Rapid Response Coordinator, and I cover the western part of Virginia. You do have a PowerPoint there. I wasn't going to bore you with having to watch a slide. I will try to follow that, but it may not follow exactly. If not, you have the information to take home with you. Well, first of all, rapid response. I answer this question all the time. If you've never heard of it, no, do not call me if there has been a natural disaster and you're wanting somebody to come in and take care of the people who are hurt. As I tell some people, it's not a blood and guts thing. And I will say, and I'm going to cover here in a little while you will want to call me if there is a natural disaster, me or one of the other people. Rapid Response is a workforce development program, and we believe that it is a partnership for a stronger workforce, and therefore a stronger economy and stronger communities. It is funded through the Workforce Investment Act, passed in 1998, but for over 40 years there has been a workforce program in this country. At the federal level, it is overseen by the Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. The funds are sent down to the state level, and in Virginia, the community college system oversees the program. The community college system then contracts with 4 community colleges to provide regional programs. I am one of those coordinators for the regional program, and as I said, I cover the western part of Virginia. And you have a map there in slide 3 that shows you the regions and the community colleges listed there. And I'm going to give you a website, or there is a website on slide 7. where you can get that map and get contact for your regional coordinator if you're not in my area. There are many points of entry for the rapid response program. And slide 4 will show you the Department of Labor National Response Unit, the national office for that, the Virginia Workforce Centers, the Virginia Workforce Investment Boards. And if I'm throwing out a lot of things that you've never heard before, you're going to have time to ask me questions. Remember, I started out with saying this is federally funded. I don't know how many pages that act was. So obviously I can't explain them all in the time that we have here, but I'll answer some questions when we get to the end. So there's a lot of points of entry. We are basically charged as a rapid response unit for being both proactive and reactive with our workforce. We work in all phases. We are most known for the reactive phase. When a company is laying off or closing, and we get word of that, whether it be through a WARN notice, which is a worker adjustment retraining notification, another act that created that, whether it's through one of those required notices or just a rumor. And I haven't seen rumors on Facebook that I've followed up on. I'm not joking on that either. And I will call I will follow up on every lead that I have with a company that may be in trouble or in need. That is the reactive phase. What happens during that phase? I get that knowledge, I follow up, I bring in what is called a management briefing. And who is at that management briefing? It's me. If you're in another area, it's the rapid response coordinator for that area. It will always be the Virginia Employment Commission. Depending upon the circumstances, it could be an economic development person. And also, depending on the circumstances, we may bring in someone from the community college for training, retraining needs. If not, they're going to be at a later part in their response. We start planning. Well, actually, one of the first questions that I will ask, is there any way we can prevent this layoff? What can we do to prevent it? If there is any possible way that we find that we can prevent it, and occasionally it does happen, then we'll start down that track instead of starting down the track of placing those employees into a transition program. If not, if the answer is no, we follow the other path. We start planning for transition services for those employees. And we coordinate with all different agencies that has any type of support for your workforce. A lot of the times you will see that we have the Virginia Employment Commission involved. We have the community college involved. We will have possibly veteran services if there are veterans, adult education if there is a need there. But then there are support programs within each community that may be unique to that community, and we get them involved. And then I share all the information back and forth with partners so that we know what's going on. That's the reactive phase. The proactive phase, that's when we find out that there may possibly be a way to save or help a business. The Department of Labor calls upon us as a rapid response unit, and there's one in every state, to provide layoff aversion tactics. And they also define that as elimination or significant reduction of unemployment. They do not define significant, however. So it's whatever we think is significant. That is layoff aversion. Now, to me, that can be a whole group, a whole industry, or one individual at a time. We prefer the whole group or the whole industry. In working with businesses who may be teetering a little bit, we can bring in the Virginia Department of Business Assistance, local economic development, state economic development. and possibly look at other options to help them. I had one company that had announced that they were going to close, for example, and they could not work out a lease agreement. So they announced closure of their business. And I said, to me, that's just not acceptable. I'm not going to accept that. Let's see if we can't help. Now, I can't negotiate a lease for them, but economic development can. And so far, that business has not closed. They are working on a lease in another part of that area. So that is a layup to me. That's a layoff that has been averted. Those people still have a job. We can bring in customized training solutions for a group of employees. And there is a state incumbent worker training policy. Some local areas, the state is divided into 15 Workforce Investment Act areas. Some local areas have an incumbent worker policy. If not, the state has one. What can we do with that? If there is an industry that has had to change their product line or their technology to continue to produce a product line, and they are at risk of closing if they do not have a retrained workforce, through an incumbent worker policy, we can retrain that workforce. And that is something to keep in mind as you are hearing about what's going on in your areas. There are some support systems and funds available. And unfortunately, in Virginia and most other states, every year we send back rapid response funds to the federal level. We never use them all. Stabilization efforts, and that would be part of it. The incumbent worker training would be part of the stabilization efforts for a company. And a regional skills gap analysis is something that can be a proactive approach to workforce issues in your area. There are rapid response funds available at the state level that can be used in part to fund a skills gap analysis for a region or a local area. Probably not going to look at it for one county at a time. We would prefer regional activity and possibly maybe a planning district or maybe an entire workforce investment region. But if you feel like your workforce investment board maybe should go in that direction, that if any of you serve on those CLEOs with them, you certainly should be encouraging them to request rapid response funds to fund those skills gap analysis. And that will tell you where your workforce skills are that you have, where they're headed, where your industry and your business needs are, and that's really key. And we heard from Delegate Kilgore earlier about those, how there is a gap between the skills of our workforce now and our business needs. We've got to listen to those businesses. Now, I talked about transition services. I want to define those a little bit. And I'm going over this. Typically, I stand in front of a group of your constituents, or one of us, one of the coordinators in the state, stands in front of a group of your constituents, and we're trying to lead them through their unemployment situation into another job, transition them from one employment to the next employment, and hopefully into a better situation. And because of that, I wanted you to know what we tell them and what we provide for them. When we set up that meeting with those employees, we're always going to have at the table information and details on how they file an unemployment claim. That's pretty much a given. They got to know that. We've got to know the job search requirements that go along with that. And the Virginia Workforce Connection system that is available for job search and required in the state of Virginia for that. The Dislocated Worker Program, which is, again, funded through Workforce Investment Act funding. This is a program that provides job search assistance, intensive job search assistance, and/or retraining to those employees. Through that, they are going to provide, once an employee works with that case manager on an individual basis, they're going to go through an assessment to find out what their skills, desires, interests, and abilities are. That case manager is then going to put together an employment and training program for that individual. I work with the group. I bring them in and I connect them with all the resources of their communities and of the state. That case manager is working with them on an individual basis. And that is the one that is also going to be leading them through that employment and retraining program and heading them towards the high demand occupations in your area. There is a chart that each local area utilizes that lists those high demand, high wage occupations. And they are charged with going by that chart so that they're never retraining anyone for a job that is not going to provide sustainable wages for them or go away in the next month. So we are making an effort to improve your workforce in your local areas by that means. As a coordinator, I can also work with that group to put together with the community college system fast-track training programs or maybe even a longer training program that would prepare a group, a cohort for a particular business. If there is an expanding business in the area or a new business coming to the area, we can begin that training program to prepare them as a group for that. And I will tell you, almost every group that I have worked with, the top thing that they want to know, past unemployment, which is only, if you haven't heard, there are no extensions in the state now. I don't expect any more. I'm not a congressman, so I don't really know. There is only $378 maximum that they can get per week for unemployment for 26 weeks. They have 26 weeks to find a job. They have 26 weeks to get over the shock of losing one that they just had and find another job. Because of that, knowing as early as possible that a business is struggling is key. It's essential that we get in there and start working with that group of employees way before that door ever closes. But 26 weeks is not a very long time when you're looking for a job and you're facing the competition that is out there. The next thing they're going to want to know, every group, what about health care? We tell them about FAMOUS, which is a program for dependent children. And beyond that for adults, and it also covers expecting mothers, but beyond that for adults, they have the free clinics and some reduced fee healthcare providers in their area. That's the information that we share with them. There is no magic wand on that. And they want to know what they're going to do about that. We bring in credit counseling, or we provide them with a referral contact for a credit counselor, because they also want to know how am I going to pay my bills now. So we provide that support to the group. On slide 12, I want to point this out to you. I said earlier, it's a natural disaster a disaster, don't call me to let you up, because I can't handle it, you do it. However, let's say like it happened about a little over a year ago in Washington County, a tornado comes through and wipes out an entire business. You should call me. You should call me as soon as you know about that. I don't care what time it is. And I give another example from there. And I don't have a specific on this, a major chemical spill shuts down a place for an extended period of time. Those employees in both those situations and others that I'm sure may come to your mind would be eligible for our services. They need support services and they are eligible for unemployment. We don't need to just lose them from our communities or our workforce because they have no way to go in to work. I am the coordinator for that, and I would like for areas, again, if I'm not your coordinator for the Western region, if you're in another area, your own rapid response coordinator, include us in your county or your locality emergency planning. Not to take precedence ever over the safety of your people there, but because we need to start that process as soon as possible. It is very likely that if something like that has happened, that the infrastructure and the communication means are also strained. And that's the reason I say call me day or night, it doesn't matter. I need to get started on it. I may have to drive around to find people if I can't call them. But we will put together a response team for that while you're working on the other things that you need to work on. My team will be in the background working on that. And probably we would have to coordinate together because we'll have to find a place to meet. Somebody's yard or county admin building or something. So please include us in your local emergency planning. On your back page there, on page 14, on slide 14, you have some of the roles that actually as all rapid response coordinators see elected officials, economic development, county administrators, what we see as your role in the process. Part of an early warning system. If no one has ever told you, you are a partner to the rapid response system, to the Virginia Workforce Network, you are considered a partner for that. And we need that partnership. Like I said earlier, early notification is key to getting that group re-employed as soon as possible. We can provide so many more services if we know well in advance. And a lot of times, you sitting here in this room are going to be the first ones to know about a company that is struggling, about a company that is expanding and urgently needs employees. We know where they are, and we know what their skills are because we've already assessed them. And we're here to help. And I do understand from talking with a lot of economic development people over the years, as you're prospecting, you need to maintain confidentiality. We will maintain that confidentiality. If you need our help to help you find that workforce or to even give you that labor market information as you're in that phase so that you can tell that possible new business what you have in the area as far as the workforce, we can provide that information. You can point the businesses to your rapid response coordinator because you're oftentimes the one in the area that may be speaking with them. You can be there when they say this is going on. You point them to us. And one thing that I would really like to stress don't let the media contact us first. You contact us, whether you're a county administrator, an elected official, economic development, contact your rapid response coordinator, say, hey, this is I think VACo is struggling. So that when my phone rings, I don't hear from a reporter first. And they say, Becky, what's going on with VACo? And I have to say, I don't know, what do you know? That actually doesn't look very good on our community or on their system. It's much better if we all know what's going on and we can all report on it. And if you can always point the media to me. Anyone that contacts you and says, hey, you represent this group of people, what's going on? And you can say, Becky Caucus is the Rapid Response Coordinator. Here is her phone number, and you can contact her about that, or the appropriate coordinator. On slide 15, you have the email addresses for all the other coordinators in the state, and mine, the website that was on page 7 or slide 7 will give you a link, and I didn't cover that. The state rapid response site there will give you that map for your region and contact information for all the coordinators in the region and some other information on the WARN specifications. Also, the WARN log site there. You can see all notices for current and previous years by any region, and you can sign up on that site for email notification when a new WARN is posted. And with that, I know I used a lot of jargon. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
You talked a lot about businesses in trouble and calling them so forth. What if it's the same person business? What's the person who's self-employed? Do you contact you? Is there another agency that deals with that?
You can always contact a rapid response coordinator. What we would do is get economic development involved, and we probably would get the small business development groups involved in that case. We would always ask first what's going on.
Do you have a number, a threshold number of the number of employees that would fall in your category?
Each one of us, as regional coordinators, operates under a memorandum of understanding with the state. That threshold stated in that is 25 employees. However, it is somewhat up to us beyond that, and I myself have gone into a business with 6 employees. And it was because I felt it was very important. It was a small grocery store chain. Well, it's a small grocery store business in our area, but it is a chain. And I had about 10 of those stores in my region. So it's very important to me, even though they only had 6 employees at that particular location, to establish that relationship and see what I could do to help with the other regions. So I go well below my 25. Any other questions?
Do you ever get businesses finding you and contacting you first, and you contact the jurisdiction?
Yes, sometimes. Usually that is when someone in that HR department or management team of that business has been through a rapid response event somewhere else in their career, so they're familiar with the process. I have an HR background in private industry. I've not been a lifelong state employee. And having done that, I understand that in businesses, a lot of people don't understand the state agencies and the services that we provide. But the ones that have contacted me have been through that before, unfortunately. And it is that is so much more reason that we all work as a network to market the services that are available for your businesses in your area. And those are through the Rapid Response Program, the Virginia Workforce Network. We all work together.
And you mentioned that each year you send back funds to the federal government to dedicate use. So what, is it a large amount of money?
I'm afraid to answer to, yes, to me it's a large amount of money, but I don't know the specific amount. It would have been enough to help many people. What happens with the federal funds? It is sent to each state based on a formula, and then the state has a set aside percentage that they keep, and the remainder of those funds are sent into the local workforce investment areas based on formulas. The set aside amount is there to fund any of those areas that may run out of funds, because they may have an unusually high unemployment year, and they can request more funds. Those funds, those set-aside funds are also available for that incumbent worker training program that I mentioned, for the skills gap analysis that I mentioned. Those requests can be made. And with that in mind, there is really no such thing yet as a local area completely running out of dislocated worker training funds.
You mentioned veterans, and of course we have a lot of veterans that come home now, a lot of disabled veterans. In my district, there's a retreat that's being built for veterans to come to directly from the hospital for such vocational training and transition back to society. Is that organization, which is all nonprofit right now, they're trying to pull together resources and they're getting donations. Is that an organization that you could help with? Something that you could help with the training for the veterans?
Which area are you in?
We consider Northern Virginia, this is the western portion of Allen County.
Your rapid response coordinator is Greg Vaughn, which is a veteran himself, and he would also be working with that agency or any agency providing support like that, as he would bring them to the table with the other partners to the Virginia Workforce Network. We will utilize everyone's resources available to assist workers. You're welcome. My western region doesn't have the big, as large of veteran population as the other parts of the state do. I will be on a webinar in the morning for a new grant program that is just being started out. We haven't even been through we're just learning about it in the morning, that will be operating through the Virginia Community College system to provide more training opportunities for veterans.
And when do you anticipate that rolling out?
Hopefully we'll find out in the morning. I think I found out on Friday that the webinar was happening in the morning, and I will be on it in the morning. The governor is pushing it though, so that gives you a timeline. Any other questions? You have my contact information there. If you have any questions, please contact me, one of the other coordinators in the region. Like we tell the workers when we meet with them, we know we just gave you a lot of information and we don't expect you to retain it all. But hopefully you will at least remember to contact us with a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for sharing some of the important work that you and your folks do. Executive Director for the Center for Rural Virginia. He's going to come up and say a few words. When Glenn gets finished, we'll open the floor for a few more questions if you have any for Delegate Hodges or anybody else on the panel. And then hopefully I'll have time to talk just maybe about 30 seconds about what the Rural Caucus is and sort of where we're going. So with that, Glenn. Thank you.
Thank you, Bo. We appreciate the opportunity to take a few brief minutes and bring you up to date on what took place at the Rural Summit this past September and some of the opportunities that we have. First of all, one of the real valuable activities that the Rural Center is engaged in is we have the privilege to work with the Rural Caucus and facilitate and help them during the General Assembly. And I would like with you all to recognize Delegate Hodges from down Northern Neck area or Middle Peninsula. Get that right. And his colleague from over at Northern Neck was involved this past year with the General Assembly. He said he was a small business person. That's real important for us in rural to understand and recognize. He came in and has provided some good leadership to the caucus. He was a leader in creating a business caucus, small business caucus, and that was valuable, and it's been a great pleasure to work with Delegate Hodges and his colleagues there. And so he also was involved in the Rural Summit's caucus convening that we had in September, where the legislators came to the Rural Summit and were engaged in discussing how they move forward as we head into this next year in a new General Assembly. In briefing you on the outcome and the deliverables of the summit and the three core issues that was addressed, workforce education, transportation, tax reform or tax structures and funding sources, I think it's important to back up a little bit in view of the great program that we've heard here today and give you a little history as to how the Rural Center chose those three topics for this year, the work that went into moving forward for them, and then where I would ask you all to be a part of working with both us and our partners, VACo, VML, the Planning District Commission, the economic developers, in carrying this message forward, as we've heard a number of times today, that's needed in order to impact our political and policy process for rural Virginia. Ellen Davis took on, who is a board member of the Rural Center, as you all's state director of USDA Rural Development, took on the role this past January of leading a group of Rural Center directors in addressing what the key issues were for rural that needed to be addressed and discussed from a policy perspective. And it's real important to notice that in addition to the normal people that we think that step forward and help put that program together, is she had people from Rolls-Royce, board member, Alpha Natural Resources, an insurance executive from the Valley, people from Eastern Virginia, Wood Preservers, Inc., those that were engaged in providing the input and the planning, as well as from Northern Virginia. Delegate Scott was key and instrumental in the planning of the summit subject and engaging in what was brought forth. One of the activities, and you know, we tend to address, or I do, I look at solving problems every day. So I address the problems. This morning's speaker was really valuable for me to stop and say, you know, we are making progress. We're making progress in rural, and we're making progress in urban, suburban. And Virginia's a very wealthy state, as Senator Hanger informed us about a little bit ago. And so we shouldn't get so bogged down in the problem section. And one of the elements of the Rural Summit was a report from directors from around the rural regions about the progress and activities that had been made and were engaged in. And as well as that, we received information from the national level Rural Policy Research Institute, Chuck Fluharty came and opened some thought processes, as well as the Southern Growth Policy Board. I want to note that we had planned to be as a part of that. Matt Chase, as you all were introduced today, is now the Executive Director of VACo. We've worked with Matt over the past few years, and he brought some thought process into the planning and direction for it. So the planning and the bringing together to address the 3 points of workforce, transportation, and tax reform was a thought out and planned discussion, and I think the Rural Center Board was on target with that when I listened to what VACo has dealt with today. Now, before I just touch on briefly the 3 or the deliverables that came out of that discussion, I want you to think about where we go with it. You know, we started off, Delegate, when last January they had the discussion about what the issues should be and how we should address them, was prepare for the 2013 General Assembly and to provide input to legislators. And Delegate Scott says, you know, if you can come out of there with something I might be able to put my hands around and develop a policy position for rural that would be valuable for rural, that would just truly be something worthwhile for our summit activities. Well, as it has evolved along and we've gone through this year of elections, I would like to challenge you all to think about this beyond that. Yes, we will get through the General Assembly session and deal with short-term policies, but we've heard all day from a number of speakers about long-term opportunities. And so the deliverables that came out of the summit program have long-term ramifications. We have a gubernatorial race next year. And rural Virginia needs to come out of this discussion of activities and these 3 core issues and say, you know, we put together a position to present to the gubernatorial candidates and get some buy-in and have them come back and talk about it not only in rural but suburban, urban, and work both sides of the aisle, such that next fall, this time when we're together, we're developing a policy position to take to a new administration. And it is really important, as you have a new administration move into Richmond, that you have positions as rural leaders to go work with those secretaries and leaders there. And so as I and the Rural Center Board talk about where we go and meet in another month about what the specifics of these should be, they're both short and long term. And I challenge you all to think about that as an action activity. Now, on workforce, the real final discussion that came out of what, Ellen, about 40 people, between 40 and 50 people spent an entire day addressing what was taking place in education, in workforce training, in providing the basis for our employees to meet the needs of employers in the marketplace and those prospective employers. Today we heard discussion about Rolls-Royce and Boeing and some others that it is natural that they might locate their supply chain in your rural areas. And the 2 or 3 points that came out of the discussion out of that workforce session was streamline the workforce development system and align the educational and training programs to equip graduates with certificates, certification, degrees, and start that in a process that's K through lifelong learning. And we've had the discussion here today. You know, K through 12, junior college, apprentice programs, retraining. In today's world in Virginia, it's a complete process. And then the other major factor, and we hear this continually out of the state leadership in Richmond, the business community has got to step up and say what they need. Now, the reason I recognize Delegate Hodges, he sees an opportunity in his business to have young people come out of pharmacy school and come back into his business and keep those private pharmacists in rural regions. What has he and his colleagues done? They've established a training program, and Keith is an adjunct professor in the pharmacy school talking about entrepreneurship and how to be and become involved as a small business owner as a pharmacist. I look around here, there's a number of you all that have businesses that we need to take that approach to business development to maintain our rural business environment. And so the other point that came out of the day-long discussion was launch a massive effort to engage the business community with the education system in identifying workforce needs and then bridging and aligning that gap between workforce needs from employers and what's being produced by our education system. So that's the element that's being carried forward there. In transportation, first of all, the team that worked on that identified for Virginia that the transportation system is the greatest economic factor for our economy. One of the things that's attracted Rolls-Royce and others to this state is the value of the transportation system. And that we as a state need adequate funding to maintain our transportation system such that our economy can continue to grow, and that we need to support statewide initiatives in physical condition and comprehensive statewide planning. And the last was to avoid devolution. And so that is the element that came out of the summit that will be carried forward. Now for taxation and funding, a real hotly debated program and discussion, and I would say Ellen very early on told the committee, said, hey, you know, we don't want to just listen to ourselves and get our own thoughts as to what we think needs to happen to fix rural. Let's get from both sides of the issue, and so we invited speakers from the Thomas Jefferson Institute, from the Commonwealth Institute. We had VACo and VML speaking to the group. We had people on both sides talking about the tax issue, and they came up with a list of ideas, modernize the state tax code to reflect the global high-tech consumer business economy and technology that Virginia is dealing with. Number two, to create incentives to encourage counties and municipal entities to look at joint provisions of public service. In other words, incentivize or reduce the barriers to revenue sharing and agreements among localities. Number three, a commission to study the long-term feasibility of the current system of taxing rural. And we've heard discussion about that today. Number four, to acknowledge the disparate conditions across rural geographies, meaning that one-size policy does not fit all. Southwest Virginia, South Side, Eastern, or the Valley of Virginia. And that's what Senator Hanger was talking about earlier. And then lastly, they addressed the B-poll tax, but ended up saying that there needed to be a way to look at making city counties whole if they started eliminating some of the taxes. So going forward, the Rural Center Board meeting is going to be meeting next month. They're going to be addressing the issues not only for the delegates and the senators to look at this spring, but also what their work and efforts could be with the gubernatorial candidates, the summit this next September, and then a new administration and following in January. And I ask you all to think about and provide help on how to frame the message, how to get the message to the business community, how to get the message to legislators about your need in a way that we can come around the table and develop positions and compromise, Bo, that can bring these policy issues together to expand and help to grow the Virginia economy. Be happy to answer any questions. That's a real brief summary into what took a year, Ellen, to pull together, but I appreciate we had the best attendance that we've ever had at the Rural Summit. We had by far and away the best participation, and there's a lot of good things happening. We're making a lot of progress in rural. You know, we're doing a lot of good things. Every region's got workforce elements going on. They've got broadband, they've got transportation discussion. But in the economy that we're facing today and tomorrow, we have a lot of opportunities to look at those and look at how we expand on. So, Bo, I appreciate the opportunity to have a couple of minutes to present this to everybody, and I'll sit down, and the delegates are one that understands about what it's about, because he was a leader in the Rural Caucus convening at the summit and a part of our summit discussion, and we'll happy to work with you every way we can. Thank you, Bo.
Any more questions for anyone? Any questions out there? Yeah.
Yeah, this is for Glenn and anybody else that heard Finance Director Rick Brown speak this morning, but he alluded to modification that might have been made by the state in the tax structure, and then seemed to be suggesting that the message from local governments had gotten off signal, and that was somehow a drop ball. I don't know if anybody heard that or understood it that way, or if I'm just imagining things, but I'm wondering, what was that about? Does anybody know?
I wasn't in there. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment. I don't think any of you all were in there. I wasn't in there, and so do I understand that he said that there was a change in, like a
Well,
tax
that there was some
change?
preliminary calculations being made, maybe a movement at the state level with the thought process in that direction, and suddenly the message from local government became blurred because there were people pushing other agendas, and suddenly, well, maybe here's an answer.
We may have an
I
answer here.
think I was in that meeting.
Okay,
He was talking about the aid to localities,
okay, gotcha.
and the understanding that we all have is that when they started cutting the budget, localities was certainly on that board, just as all the state agencies were. And they wanted to do away with the aid to localities, but then they have to deal with Medicare and all those other things. Essentially, the money we send back is a compromise in that Richmond, instead of saying you have to cut this, 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 and this, we're gonna send you less money for this, this, and this, it sent us the money, told us to decide what to cut and send it back. And so, I think what he was trying to say was, while we're still dealing with Medicare, while we're still looking at devolution and all, it's hard to also look at that, aid to localities and further reduction.
And I actually, before I came to VACo, I was in the Department of Planning and Budget with the state and actually worked for Secretary Brown. And don't throw anything at me, but I was the one over there doing the aid to locality reductions. And then I come over to work for VACo, and Dean and Jim were like, what were you doing that for? So, you know, just to add to that, you know, the governor last fiscal year, he did restore a portion of the aid to localities that they used to balance the state budget on. We still haven't got all that money back. There was about 60 million or so that they took originally. We got about 15 million back last fiscal year, and hopefully we'll get a little bit back this coming year. You know, I don't want to go on too long here, but when the governor touts a surplus in general fund revenues, and it's in the papers, and he's broadcasting it, we look at that and say, okay, a lot of that's already committed to your rainy day fund, to a lot of other things. But we also like to point out that say, you still haven't restored all of the aid to localities. Another factor is when the aid to locality reductions go down to a locality, they say you can decide where you want to take the cuts. If you don't decide in a certain amount of time where you take those cuts, DPB, the Department of Planning and Budget, will decide for you. And I think that's a little bit what you were talking about. So.
I think a lot of the complaint is that they sit in Richmond and brag that they have not raised taxes. What they've done is forced us to raise taxes.
Yeah, yeah. So, good question. Anybody else? Great. Well, let's give our panelists and guests a round of applause. I'll just add, I know I'm sitting between you all in a reception here, but I will add that Chad Hood, who's our chairman of the VACo Rural Caucus, he's new, and I'm actually the new staffer for the VACo Rural Caucus. We were talking one day, and he said, Bo, what does the VACo Rural Caucus do? I said, well, we meet at the annual conference, we have a great discussion typically, and then I don't know where it goes from there. So I think the first step in that process is deciding who's on our roster, who our membership is, and I think it should be open. And that's why I've got a sign-up sheet back there. If you've signed up on that sheet, I'll send you an email with a Caucus interest form. You fill it out, you send it back to me, and you're on the rural caucus. And from there, hopefully we can establish maybe a little bit of a purpose, statement of purpose, what we do. And actually, Chad was talking to me about foreseeing the VACo Rural Caucus being almost an advisory committee. We can't be a VACo legislative committee, but I think we could be an advisory committee to where we vet ideas and we vet concerns. And then maybe we write, if we have a concern and we don't see it on a steering committee agenda, we write a letter and advising them to look at the issue and potentially put it on the platform. So I think that could be a role, and Chad certainly thinks that could be a role for the VACo Rural Caucus. So if you've signed up back there, you'll hear more from me in the coming weeks here. Thanks for coming.